In the big story of the world, some people were like giants. They changed countries' futures and left big marks on the whole world. Two such important people were Charles de Gaulle and Winston Churchill. They were strong leaders who guided their countries through the tough times of 1900s. In this documentary, we look deep into their lives, how they led, and what they left behind. We want to figure out the question that has been asked for a long time. Who was the better leader? Let's dive into their stories and find out together. Let's go back to the early 1900s to meet Charles de Gaulle. He was a smart French military person with big ideas. Born in Lille in 1890, he showed he could be a leader when he was young. When World War I happened, de Gaulle did well. People noticed him for being good at making smart plans and not being scared, even when things were tough. The war, in the time between big fights, de Gaulle talked about using strong, protected vehicles in battles. He was like a wizard, seeing that there might be a big problem with Germany soon. His words were like a crystal ball, warning everyone about the danger of Nazi Germany before it became a big issue. Now, let's cross the big water to the other side of the English Channel and meet Winston Churchill. His path to become a leader is really interesting. He was born into a fancy family in 1874. When he was young, he wanted to be a successful politician. Before he became a big leader, Churchill did many things. He wrote stories about wars, went to fight in them, and even became a famous writer. All these things set the stage for his long political career that lasted for 60 years. What's cool is that even before many people realized it, Churchill saw a big problem. He talked early about how Hitler was becoming powerful and dangerous. It was like he was the only one saying, "Hey, this is not good," when others weren't paying enough attention. When World War II started, France was in big trouble because of the powerful Nazis. Charles de Gaulle, even though his government didn't think he was that important, became a big deal because he believed in what he was doing. In a famous talk on June 18, 1940 from London, he told the people in France to not give up. He said, "Keep fighting against the bad guys who took over our land." The soldiers he led, called the Free French Forces, became a strong symbol of France, saying no way to the people causing trouble. Now, let's look across the big water to Britain. Winston Churchill became the boss, known as the Prime Minister when things were really tough during World War II. It was like the darkest time for Britain. Churchill was super good at giving powerful speeches, and one of the most famous ones was when he said, "We shall fight on the beaches." In that speech, he told everyone to be brave and not give up. Even when bad things were happening, he inspired the people in Britain to be strong during the Blitz, which was a time lots of bombings. Churchill's strong determination and his skill with words made everyone in his country and even his friends in the Allied team really like him. Let's talk about how de Gaulle led. He was a serious and strong leader. People could see it in the way he acted, calm and in charge. He was someone who believed strongly in his ideas. But sometimes he didn't agree with the other leaders in the Allied team. They had different thoughts about what France should do after the war. De Gaulle wanted France to be a big player on the world stage and even have its own strong weapons, like nuclear ones. This showed how much he cared about France being its own boss. He was also really charming and impressive, but sometimes he seemed a bit distant. It's like he had this mysterious way about him that made people curious. Now let's chat about how Winston Churchill led. He was like a wizard with words and good at talking. We call that being a master of oratory. He was also a super smart diplomat, which means he was excellent at dealing with other countries. Churchill knew that to get things done, sometimes you had to make deals and find middle ground with other leaders. He was good at making friends too. Not just any friends, but important ones, like Roosevelt from the United States and Stalin from the Soviet Union. Having these strong friendships helped keep everyone on the same team during the war. His way of leading was a mix of being inspiring, funny, and super smart about planning. It's like he had this special recipe that made people want to follow him. After all the chaos of World War II, de Gaulle had a big job ahead, fixing up France, which was pretty beaten up. When he became the boss, known as the president, he did something important. He made a new set of rules like a playbook for the country, called the Fifth Republic. This playbook made the leader's job stronger and brought more stability. But de Gaulle wanted France to be its boss, especially when it came to having powerful weapons like nuclear ones. He also decided that France should step back a bit from a big team of countries called NATO. It was like saying, we want to do things our way. This showed how much he wanted France to be independent and important on the world stage. After the war, things changed for Churchill. He wasn't the boss anymore. From 1951 to 1955, he tried really hard to keep Britain important in the world, especially when many countries were becoming independent. This process is called decolonization. But even though Churchill was a great leader and spoke in a way that inspired people, there were some tough times. The country faced many problems. Money was one of them, and the way politics worked shifted. In 1955, when people voted, his team didn't win, so he had to step back. As time went on, Churchill did something else amazing. He wrote a lot of books and stories. He was so good at it that he won a special prize called the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1953. Even though he wasn't the leader anymore, he still found ways to show how incredible he was. De Gaulle left a big mark on France, and we call it Gaullism. It's like his special way of doing things. People really like him for making France strong again after the war, and making things more modern. But not everyone agrees on everything. Some people say he was too bossy and wanted too much control, kind of like a strict teacher. And there was this time in May 1968 when lots of people were upset and started big protests and strikes. It got so serious that it almost made his government fall down. So even though when he did good things, there are also some arguments about how he did them. That's why his legacy, the stuff he left behind, is a mix of cheers and disagreements. When we talk about what Winston Churchill left behind, it's a bit like a puzzle, a mix of good and not so good things. Many people really admire him because he was like a superhero, leading Britain when things were really, really tough. But just like everyone, he had things that not everyone agrees with. Some people don't like how he was a part of decisions about bombing places during the war, and that's a big argument. Some also say he had old-fashioned ideas about being in charge of other countries, which we call imperialistic views. It's like saying we are in charge and we decide what happens. So, while he's a hero for many, there are also some tough questions about the choices he made. We are diving into a big question about who was the better leader, Charles de Gaulle or Winston Churchill. It's like a delicate thread in the big story of history, and it's not easy to figure out. Let's talk about what these leaders left behind. Charles de Gaulle's legacy is all about France. He made a special set of rules, the Fifth Republic, which is still a big deal today. But some people say he was a bit too bossy and had fights with his friends, which makes things a bit complicated. Now, Winston Churchill left a legacy that goes way beyond Britain. It's like a message of hope for the whole world. His words were still inspiring, and today some people are inspired by what he did. And there are some people who don't like some things he did, like making tough decisions during the war and having old-fashioned ideas about leading other countries. To understand these leaders, we need to think about when they were in charge. Charles de Gaulle led France after it went through really tough times in the war. He wanted France to be strong and free. Winston Churchill, on the other hand, led during World War II, when things were super hard. He didn't just have to be smart, he also had to inspire the people to keep going. Now, let's not forget these leaders were real people with good and not so good parts. De Gaulle was a bit mysterious and liked to keep to himself. Churchill, though, was a great speaker, making people laugh with his jokes. The personal side of these leaders is like an extra layer to understand them better. In the end, figuring out who was the better leader is like putting together a big puzzle. It's not just about the big things they did, but also about who they were as people. The story of de Gaulle and Churchill is not just about history, it's about real people facing real challenges. Now, here comes the big moment for you, the audience. We have been talking about Charles de Gaulle and Winston Churchill, trying to figure out who was the better leader. But maybe, just maybe, the answer isn't about one being better than the other. Maybe greatness comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. As you think about this tricky question, remember that being a great leader doesn't mean fitting into just one mold. De Gaulle and Churchill were like puzzles, pieces that fit perfectly into the times. They did different things, but both made history interesting. Leadership is like a big buffet with all kinds of dishes. Is it the person with big ideas who changes a whole country, or is it the one who lifts people up when things were really tough? Maybe it's a bit of both. So here's your challenge. Imagine you are in the front row of a grand show about history, and the story of de Gaulle and Churchill is wrapping up. The big question hits you. Who in your eyes was the greater leader? Think about what qualities you really like. Maybe it's de Gaulle's strong will or Churchill's never give up attitude. Look at the challenges they faced and the choices they made. Picture their marks on the canvas of time, like bright colors in a painting. As you tackle this challenge, remember, history isn't about picking just one winner. It's more like a beautiful quilt with lots of different pieces. The story of de Gaulle and Churchill is a reminder that leaders can be all sorts of things. And that's what makes history so fascinating. So here's to you, the critic, the admirer, the judge, and the storyteller. The unspoken question doesn't need a final answer. It's an invitation for you to journey through the time, explore the many sides of leadership, and appreciate how people shape the world.